Hello everyone. Today we will see variables and data types in C programming language. So what is a variable? So by definition, a variable is a container in which you store your information or data. Data is nothing but your values. Let's consider the example of a banking system. If you want to do some transaction, you need to have an account number, name, and the amount you want to deposit or withdraw. So if this information is not stored in the system, then you cannot process anything. You cannot do the transaction. So data or your values or the information must be stored inside the computer system so that you can process it. Look at this diagram. So let's assume this is a computer memory where few data are stored inside the memory. Now data is stored, but can you access it? Uh, let's assume I want to access this value London. How will you access it? For this, either you should know the memory address or the name of that memory address. Because we don't know where computers stored the data in the memory. Even we don't know the memory addresses of our data. Then how we will access it? Let's take a human being as an example. Let's assume a human being has no name. A person has no name. Then through which the world will identify him. If he doesn't have any name, he would have no identity. How people will recognize him? And this and the same way, if the stored data has no name, or if you don't know the memory address, you cannot access it. And that is why a variable is nothing but an identity to a memory location where your information is stored. A variable is nothing but a container where your values are stored, and with that variable name you can access, you can retrieve, or you can manipulate your data. So let's say number 1 is equals to 10. I assigned a value 10 to variable number 1. So what happens inside the memory? A memory block gets allocated for your variable, which is known as number 1. 10 value will get stored inside that memory block, and that memory block may have some memory address. It is a combination of alphabets and digits. So this is what? This is your memory address. This is your value, or you can call it as a data or the information. And this is the variable name through which you will access this information. So to declare any variable name, there are few conditions by the compiler that you have to follow. Not just for the variable name, but for the function name or any identifier declare in your program should follow these naming conventions. And what are those? So alphabets and digits and underscores are only allowed inside a variable name. So a variable name must be a combination of alphabets, digits, and underscore. It cannot start with a digit. Any variable name or an identifier name cannot start with a digit. Uppercase letters and lowercase letters are distinct. That means you can have same letters, like let's say you have C count, a capital C and a small c together inside a variable name. They have a distinct value. And keywords cannot be used as a name. What are the keywords? So if we look into the IDE, so let's say void. So if you can see, void turns to blue. So this is a keyword. If you say int, it again became blue because it is a keyword. So there are few keywords which are reserved by the C compiler that you cannot have as an integer. You can have capital IENT. It is a it can be a variable name because capital letters and small letters are distinct. So you can have capital INT as a variable name or just capital I and small nt. This is also allowed as a variable name, but not exactly this int allowed. Now, to store some value inside a variable name, you should specify the data type of that value. So just declaring number 1 is equals to 10 is not enough. You should specify the data type of this value. That means what kind of data, what kind of value will be stored inside this variable. That you should specify before you are declaring the variable name. So briefly, the data types are divided into 3 categories. Those are primitive data types, derived data types, and user-defined data types. Primitive data types are nothing but called as a built-in data types. They are provided by the C compiler. For example, integer, float, character, and void. So they are subcategorized into 4 types, where integer can have any integer value. Let's say for a positive or a negative, but an integer value. A float can have a decimal value, that is a value with a precision. Even that can be a positive or negative. A character. A character data types stores a single character inside the variable. So just a single character is allowed with that type of variable. And void is a data type that tells compiler that it is going to store no value. So when you are specific to say that your program is going to return nothing, that time you have to use void as a data type. Integer stores 2 or 4 bytes of memory depending on your operating system. If it is a 16-bit operating system, it allocates 2 bytes of memory for a integer variable. If it is a 32 or 64-bit computer system, then it will allocate 4 bytes of memory for an integer variable. Similarly, for a float variable, it will allocate 4 to 8 bytes of memory depending on your operating system. A character will always allocates 1 byte of memory for any type of operating system. And the derived data types and user data types, we will see them in later chapters. So let's look at the program. So whenever you start writing a program, the first line you have to write is hash include stdio.h. Let me repeat it once again. Stdio is nothing but a header file that is standard input output. So the functionalities required to take input and give out the output, those functionalities are already declared and defined inside this header file that we are going to use into a program, and that is why we have to include this header file with hash include preprocessor directive. Void main. So this is our main function where we will write our source code, and this function is going to return no value, and that is why I specified void here. So let's begin. I declared a variable of type integer. So first I have to say the data type name, then the variable name. As I told you, variable name can be anything. You just have to follow the rules of naming conventions. And you can assign the variable name with some value. Every statement in a C language should end with the semicolon. Semicolon tells the compiler that this is the end of statement. If you don't provide it, it will throw you an compile time error. So now what this statement means, I have declared a variable name no1 of type integer having value 100. Okay, so if I want to print this value to the output screen, I can say no1 is equals to %d. What is this %d? %d is a format specifier. It tells the compiler that this column or this position should be replaced with the value of type integer. I repeat myself, %d is called as a format specifier. It tells compiler that this position, this column will be replaced with the value of type integer. Okay, so some integer value will be replaced or will be printed here, but which value? So I said no1. So the value which is stored inside no1 variable will be replaced with this %d format specifier. I have finished writing my program. I compiled and executed the program. So it says no1 is equals to 100. no1 has the value 100 which is printed on the screen. Now I can rewrite the value. I can change the value, and that is why it is known as a variable. The values can be vary, so it is known as a variable. I change the value to 50 and now I try to print it, then it will print value as no1 is equals to 50. Now 100 is replaced with the value 50 and 100 is no more in the memory now. Let us look at the next data type, char. Char is a data type which represents character. So you should start with the data type name, then the variable name. I say ch is equals to, now I have to assign a value to the variable ch. So whenever you talk about a character variable, you have to specify a single quote and then the value. So I say character ch is equals to single inverted comma a, capital A. So what this statement tells the compiler that there is a variable declared named as ch of type character having value capital A. And now if I try to print this value, ch is equals to, now I have to say %c as a format specifier. %c is for character data type, and that %c will be replaced with the value stored inside ch. Printf ch is equals to %c inside double inverted comma, and then you put a comma with variable name ch. I compiled and executed the program. So now it says no1 is equals to 50, ch is equals to a. Now all this output comes on a same line. So what if I want this next ch is equals to a on next line? In that case, I have to say /n. What a \n means? It is a escape sequence character that takes your cursor to the next line. So once this message is printed on the output screen, cursor will go on the next line and then it will print ch is equals to %c. So no1 is equals to 50 printed on first line and ch is equals to a printed on second line. You can change the value here n number of times. it will display the value which is stored inside the variable at last. Next data type, float. Float is the data type which stores the value with precision. So I say f as a variable name is equals to 13.32. So this line tells compiler that I have declared a variable f of type float having value 13.32. And to print this value onto the output screen, you have to say f is equals to percent %f. Percent %f is a format specifier for data type float. The same way, it will be replaced with the value stored inside f. I have written printf into double quotes f is equals to percent %f, comma f. And now I compile and execute this program. Let me add a backslash n here. I compiled and executed the program, and now it tells me no1 is equals to 50, ch is equals to x, and f is equals to 13.32 and 4 times 0. So by default, percent %f prints 6 digits after the decimal point. If you don't want this much, then you can say percent %.2. So then after the decimal point, there will be 2 digits with the value float. You can say here 3 or 1 or whatever you want. I say 2 and compiled again and executed the program. So now it says f is equals to 13.32. Okay. Okay, this is all about storing a value inside the variables and printing them onto the output screen. But this is not actually we want, isn't it? We want the user to enter the value. In that case, what you will do, you have to say printf. So you ask user to enter a number. So what this printf statement will do, it will print this message onto the output screen. It will say enter a number. Then there comes a next function, scanf. What is this function for? This function takes the input whichever written on the output screen and assign it to some variable. For this, you have to again specify the type of value, that is %d or %c or %f, and then assign that value to the variable name. So this is the syntax. You have to specify the format specifier into double quotes, put comma, and put ampersand sign along with the variable name where you want to store that value. So this tells compiler that input the value of type integer, assign it at the memory location, ampersand sign represents the memory address at the memory location of variable no1. I again compiled my program and executed it. Now you can see the message has been printed on the output screen and cursor stops here. Enter a number is printed on the screen, and right now cursor is stopped here. So until you enter something, it will not going to execute the next line. So right now line number 9 has been executed and cursor stops at line number 10. Until you enter some value, it will not going to execute the next lines. So I enter here 10. You have to say enter. So as soon as I say enter, control jumps onto the next line and executes remove rest of the statements and finishes the program. So now see, no1 is replaced with the value 10, which was entered at the time of execution. When we declare the variable, we have stored 50 inside the no1. And then we replace that value with the value entered by the user at the time of execution. So no1 has the latest value, which is 10, and ch and f was as it is.